Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's Deacon Stone, the Director of Entrepreneur Services at RCBI, the Robert C. Byrd Institute at Marshall University. We're really elated to have you here today. We want to send a thanks out to our sponsor, the Benedum Foundation, whose longstanding support of RCBI's AgTech has led to 3D printers in classrooms, environmental monitors in agriculture educator classrooms, and now drones. So in this K-12 educator and student resource, we hope to touch on a few things that are changing in the drone industry, get your sights set on an exciting future that we can not only participate in, but participate in building together. And those who will be building that future, I would argue, are young people who are gaining experience in drones, entrepreneurs who are opening up new frontiers using drones and other kinds of monitoring technologies and surveillance technologies that are changing the way we look at and think about the world around us. So for a little bit more on that, we are joined by Jaime Leonard, a PhD in geography and a professor at Marshall University for the past 21 years. His areas of expertise include geographic information systems and related technologies such as drones. Under his chairmanship, the Geography Department enrollment has grown to its highest level in decades. In his role as professor, he is an FAA Part 107 licensed drone pilot and has taught classes using drones since the spring of 2017. For the 3 years from 2017 to 2020, Dr. Leonard was a private contractor using drones to fly properties for real estate marketing. Dr. Leonard is a Christian, husband to his wife for 25 years, and father of 5 children ranging in age from 22 to 8. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Dr. Leonard. How are you?
You're welcome. Great.
Excellent. I see you brought a few props with you, and I kind of did too, so I might mention, RCBI has for a long time supported robotics competitions, and in recent years, one of the foundations with whom we work has launched RAD drones. Now, these are competition drones. They definitely took what I thought a drone was and was capable of to the next level, because immediately the competition ended up being not about the drone at all. It was about teamwork, about coding and programming, about overcoming a challenge that changes every year and competing on a national and even worldwide scale. And West Virginia really shows up in these competitions. I'm elated about that. And I know you have some outcomes to share about some students and endeavors that you've been involved over the course of time with drones. So that's a little bit of how we want to talk about gateways into the use of drone technology and experience that gives young people and entrepreneurs confidence to go out there and make something different happen in this world. So,
well, since we have a few drones on the table, maybe we should talk about them. So this drone that I brought is similar to the one you had, programmable, but still more or less a toy, not very expensive, fun toy, of course. And if fun maybe is the way most people get interested in drones. So, take one on a vacation or whitewater rafting. You can have the drone follow you. So artificial intelligence drones recognize your pattern and can follow you around on a bike, in a boat, or just walking. So there's that fun stuff. And then there's the first person vision where you put on goggles and you're in the drone itself, piloting the drone around, which maybe is better your area of expertise than mine. But
definitely, as it pertains to the robotics competitions, that's definitely a factor.
Do they use the first person vision goggles?
In some cases, yes. Although a lot of it's very team. And one of the situations that happens is that with these complex arenas and challenges set up, you really rely as the pilot on your spotters to tell you how to get the drone where you want it to be, because your perspective is limited as a pilot. And there are ways in which drones, I think, are opening up those perspectives, but every perspective comes with its particular limitations. And this is a new tool, and I really think that humanity itself is really trying to learn to use this tool in fantastic new ways.
Mm-hmm. This drone here is a little bigger drone, and it has, you'll notice, 2 cameras. It has this camera, which is red, green, and blue, like you would have on your iPhone or cell phone. And then this camera in the rear, which detects near infrared, and that would be useful for crop health or forest monitoring, or a bunch of different things can be monitored with that little camera. It's not a very, high-end camera, but it would do the basic things. So maybe it's a $2,000 drone, so the cost goes up as the bells and whistles increase, and the scientific uses also, can be quite pricey, I guess how you would put it.
Sure, certainly.
Other sensors that you might get on there would be a thermal sensor, so you can detect heat signatures. Typically, those are flown at night or soon after sundown, so that the warm stuff stays warm. Or if you're looking for a living being, fly a thermal camera, and you could find, grandma that might be lost in the woods. You can find animals that you're looking for. I have a colleague at Marshall who goes to Madagascar every year, and she uses a drone to track lemurs. And I don't think she has the thermal camera, but she still flies, above them, counts them because a census is important.
Oh, that's incredible.
And it flies quiet enough and high enough above them that they're not spooked by the drone. She was worried about that when she first went. But she goes every year, flies the drone, counts the lemurs. She also assesses the cloud forest health. It's kind of a dry rainforest type. I don't know if that makes any sense, but anyway, a dry season rainforest type environment. And, so that's a use for her as well, real sort of, practical scientific conservation use.
Well, I know that we're going to be talking a little bit about, drone uses for construction and the construction industry, monitoring bridges, things of the sort. So I'm really glad we're starting off with some of these more esoteric and unique uses for drones, whether it's finding grandma or monitoring lemurs. I think that's totally fascinating because I really do feel like we're in an age where we need to kind of take the blinders off, broaden the view, and look at what's coming. Again, not just so we can sit back and say, hey, what do I need to be studying in order to, operate a drone professionally someday? Instead, we're in the driver's seat. We're actively building skills and moving toward, again, building that future together. So I think as we move forward, we're going to see remarkable things. You mentioned autonomous drones already a little bit. But I think that even drones that go under the water, like non-airborne drones, something we have to think about. We have, a drone on Mars now, right? So I love how this tech is getting normalized and just broadening our perspective in fascinating ways. So with that said, I think maybe we can jump through a few of the categories of usage in drones that we had discussed and put in this presentation together. Things like cinematic, agricultural, and outdoor recreation use. For package delivery, of course, that's a big no-duh. Everyone's talking about that right now, as well as rescue and public safety, right? So maybe we could just jump in on some of those more maybe cinematic uses of drones.
Sure.
And that might be a good time to mention your work in the real estate related business that you operated for a time.
So
what that was about.
Right. Well, we worked about 3 years with real estate agents filming from the air their properties. And of course, the higher end properties, that's really attractive to clients who want to see the landscape and they want to see, it's on a hilltop location, windswept, and, a pond in the, the backyard or something like that. So that was great. And our work is kind of pricey. To be able to do that kind of thing because you have to take a lot of time, you have to pay for the drone, you have to have a licensed pilot, all those things have to be taken care of. But it was fascinating because you can really put together a perspective that you can't see any other way. And it's, for a person who's going to buy sort of a high-end home, that's really important to them. They want to see, how many gables there are on the roof, and they want to, like I say, they want to see the swing set in the backyard. And you can capture that stuff from the ground. But it's very fascinating from the air. People love aerial perspectives.
Yeah.
Anyone's ever flown and looked out the window? That's kind of
absolutely. I was telling you too. You talked about FPV, and it made me think about VR and AR, right? The virtual reality and other headsets. And I told you about the kids and I on our Oculuses visiting the ruins at Petra, and just you're kind of going through the canyons, looking at the tombs on the red rock cliff sides, and all of a sudden, your perspective goes up above everybody's head, above every camel that's there, above all the people who are visiting. And suddenly you are seeing these ruins in this place from a perspective that no one has ever before seen it. It came to my mind that if you buy a drone and you take it out and you fly it, whether it's over your property or otherwise, you are likely etching on this earth a new perspective path than has ever before been made. And I think that time is limited. Like we'll have a lot more of this arena explored as years go on. But it's still such a fascinating thing to think about kind of how these platforms are working together to give us that brand new perspective. The dream that I have is what I would call a real-time map. You work in geography, and I often think about the fact that every map that we ever look at is expired. It's just a question of by how long.
Hmm.
And now that expiration time, like how long ago was the shot, is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's fascinating. We're approaching that I guess a vertical asymptote. Like we're approaching time zero. I don't know if we'll get there, but man, it's fascinating to get as close as we can.
And of course, that's Hollywood uses drones. Back to the cinematic idea. And sometimes I'll tell my kids when we're watching a movie, "Hey, that's a drone shot." Of course, they're like, "Dad, shut up! We're watching a movie." But so drone footage is important. I had a colleague in England who was paid as a cameraman to fly a drone. So he was basically another cameraman, but he was a drone pilot, so he got paid, I guess, a little bit more. And he would be on a set for 8 hours a day, maybe for a whole week, and his footage would be 2 seconds that wound up in the movie. But it's important footage, so that cinematic use is still pretty attractive, I guess how you put it. And then there are news reporting. I would also kind of lump that in with cinematic. So CNN's, the Fox Newses of this world, when I get those drone shots of crowds or, things like that. Sporting events, that's another cinematic use. You want drone maybe to fly over a football game or something like that. And here recently, the rules have changed a little bit in the United States to allow that a little bit more flexibility with flying over people. Safety is a huge concern with the FAA, which is the governing body for flights that are outdoors. And so, they kind of are very careful about what is permitted.
Yeah. Well, I was encouraged to hear that, as you say, like the FAA got really tight on all this stuff. And I feel like maybe it was during a period during which they were trying to understand what was going on. And now those regs are easing just a bit. But what can you tell us about the regulatory environment? A question might be, hey, if I want to work professionally in drones someday, kind of what certifications might I need? What things do I need to look forward to in order to do that, to fly over a dam or to fly over a crowd or to fly over some institution or a building? Because as it stands right now, I'm not certified, and there's places that I'm not allowed to fly my drone, whether it just says sharper image or not. It's like you're not supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. So what are the SPOSTAs and what are those certifications that folks need to know about?
So for a hobbyist, which means you're not doing it for profit, you're just having fun, the FAA wants you to register your drone, and they want you to take an online class. It takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes. You scroll through their information, and the real deal is safety. So they don't want you to hit people, and they definitely don't want you to get anywhere near a manned aircraft. So those are the two huge, or at least two huge things. Other than that, for a hobbyist, you can pretty much fly in a number of places. If you're in airspace that's controlled for manned flights, then they want to control that as well. They want you to be aware that there are manned aircraft around. But so a hobbyist can get away with quite a bit. So even though you say you don't have a license, if you're just flying for fun, you can take your sharper image drone and you can fly it through your yard for the most part. It's no problem at all. For anything that's commercial, which could be anything, like for example, let's say you're flying a shot for Marshall, and you're not going to be paid for it, but it will be used maybe in advertising for the university, then that can now considered commercial. So anything that's commercial, which we can talk about some more uses of that, but anything that's commercial, the FAA wants you to be licensed. There's a rule set called Part 107, and you have to pass a test that shows that you understand the rule set, Part 107. And I teach my students in my class how to pass that test. It's not extraordinarily difficult, but it is a credential. Again, it's kind of more or less a safety check, and you have to repeat that every couple of years. Take ongoing training to keep your license up. I got my license back maybe 2017 or so, and have kept it current since that point.
Fantastic, wonderful. So as we are working through this, it sounds like there are going to be additional changes coming. And again, it all comes down to safety. So as chagrined as we might get about, oh man, I got to get a license, I got to do this. I think once you take a look at those things, for instance, some of the drones that we're going to be able to provide with Benedum support this year for AgTech are DJI drones. And DJI has a wonderful flight permission management service kind of built into their website. And they actually block the drones. Like we had some drone competitions at Marshall University's new, aircraft mechanic training facility at the Tri-State Airport. And, we just couldn't take those DJIs off. Interestingly, in the background, all the students are flying these around like crazy, right? So there's this idea between like, what's a dumb drone, what's a smart drone, and where is the weight put, right? So there's a lot of weight on an individual to operate safely if they have a drone that's just, it's just a drone, you can take it off anywhere, and you could potentially get into some trouble. So I think when you look at those arenas and you understand that it's all for safety, you understand that we can close in on a cool new frontier and do so safely so that we don't damage property or harm ourselves or others. And I'm encouraged by that. It sounds like everybody's working to figure it out.
Right.
Are there any places where you feel like there needs to be more attention in that arena?
You mean for safety? I think the airport's the main issue. If there's controlled flights coming in and out, then that's a pretty significant thing. I live near an airport, so if I take this drone here and put it in my backyard, it won't take off.
There you
it's
go.
Very close to what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I was.
Which is maybe a good thing, but other manufacturers, maybe like these, or the ones that you use, they don't necessarily lock down their drones, so they maybe leave it more to the individual. But this company is the largest, I think, consumer drone company in the world, and so they want to be on the good side of any regulators, so they make sure their drones don't work if it's any question.
Kind of going the extra mile, and you can count on, at least not a release of liability, but maybe a reduction of your liability as you're having fun out there, or doing some cool, hopefully working up into commercial work.
That kind of brings me to this idea of drone delivery, package delivery. So I had a student, former Marshall student, who is the head of package delivery, drone package delivery for UPS in Louisville, Kentucky. And I talked to him, had him as a guest speaker in my class, and he says basically this. Of course, the package delivery companies want to deliver packages using drones because imagine this. My neighborhood, for example, consists of about 10 houses. So the UPS guy pulls up. He has packages to every house. He pushes the button. The drones take off. They go to all the houses. They come back. They land. They deliver the packages. And then he takes off and he's ready to go again. That sounds fantastic. But for safety reasons, the FAA only allows a person to control one drone at a time. So that eliminates that 10 at a time drone. In addition, the drone pilot has to be able to see with his own eyes, unaided, without binoculars, only spectacles, has to be able to see the drone the entire time, the entire flight. So UPS is experimenting with medicine delivery. So go from CVS, for example, to a person's home who can't get out. So they have to have, let's say they're going to fly 3 miles away. Well, they have to have, I don't know, I've flown these drones before, and I can only see about a half a mile. About a half a mile, that's about the limit of how far I can see. So you can imagine you get to post 5 or 6 people along this 3 mile route to be able to watch it. So that's not profitable for UPS to have one delivery take 6 people watching it.
Oh, my word.
So the rules will have to change before package delivery can become widespread. Now, other countries like Australia or places in Africa, they already permit it. What they do is they say, hey, if you're going to fly below a certain altitude, we assume there won't be any manned aircraft. So you can go with it. You can run with it. But the United States FAA hasn't gotten to that point yet. Whether they ever will or not, we don't know. But anyway, so that's an aspect that people would love to see. I mean, who would not love to have a drone deliver a package to your house? Yeah. But there again, the safety thing. Yeah. So that's understandable as well.
I see so many new technologies these days that we're waiting for them to scale. Whether it's 3D printed homes or it's drone package delivery, it's like we're just kind of like waiting for the right things to happen. And I don't want to infer that anybody's twiddling their thumbs. I think there's a great deal of work going on in the background to help make things safe. But the fact is, when we kind of crack that nut and come up with a system and a formula that can keep everybody safe and let us grow at the same time, it's going to blow the lid off this thing. The world is going to look and feel different, I believe, on the other side of it. I'm encouraged that today's rising generations really have just become accustomed to the incredible amount of change around us. And, we launch rockets and land them now. It's like, oh, yeah, we landed the rockets. Like, no big thing. Meanwhile, like, me, a kid of the 80s, I'm like freaking out. Like, this is the coolest thing ever because it took so long to get there. So the rate of acceleration is just increasing remarkably. Um, and at the same time, it has to be a little bit intimidating for educators and for young people to try to see where the dice are going to fall, like where things are going to shake out. It's good to know that there are competitions, some certifications, and other things that they can get involved in to help them proceed in lockstep progress for those coming doors when they open. You know, uh,
Well, since we're talking about educators, and since this project is going to target educators who are looking at agricultural applications, maybe we should just talk a little bit about agricultural applications. I mentioned this drone here has this sensor that will detect infrared radiation. And what you can do is create an index. It's called NDVI. It's an index of light rays. And what it does is it will, you'll be able to distinguish healthy vegetation from unhealthy vegetation. So if you're a farmer and you have 1,000 acres, well, you could certainly walk the fields and probably say, hey, this area is not very healthy. But the advantage here is it's a time saver. So you fly, and you can fly every day even and check the health of your crops if you needed to. But it will sort of give you a map version of where maybe you need more water or where you need more pesticides or where you need more fertilizer. And so you don't have to fertilize the entire field. You don't have to water the entire 1,000 acres. You can just target. And so you can take the information from the drone map that's created of your fields and plug that into your GPS-controlled tractor. Then your GPS-controlled tractor will go through the field and it'll just squirt wherever there's a need. So you're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars savings in those materials, water, fertilizer, pesticides, or whatever happens to be.
Wow.
There are apps that will actually count the number of plants you have. So let's say you planted corn. It'll fly your 1,000 acres, and it'll tell you for each acre, basically, or each plot, how many plants per acre there are. Now, you know how many you planted because your tractor did the work, but how many survived, to grow. I guess adulthood is maybe the term that I'm thinking of, but anyway, survived to be full-grown plants. If there's an area of your fields that there aren't as many surviving plants, then you can say to yourself, well, is the soil rocky? Can I do something to improve this here? So it's this diagnostic tool that can save you a bunch of money and enhance the profits at the same time, because then I need to target this field with better, some sort of improvements. So that's a huge advantage.
I can only imagine. So increases in efficiency and so on, but perhaps most importantly, just an ability to keep your fingers on the pulse of, in this case, a particular strip of land or a portion of a farm. Because as I'm thinking about, information piling in and us assessing that information, the planting versus how many sprouted versus how many are growing well, immediately in my mind, I think about that stacked up over the course of years or decades. We could see how changes in the environment, changes in the weather, in any changes at all, a drought one year, a huge snowfall another year, how these might have affected production, and therefore position us to kind of outmaneuver that, and again gain more productivity from the land. I find that absolutely fascinating. A piece of me is just screaming, "Let's just get to it. Let's get to it. Start building data." Because if data is what you're looking for, the time to start building it is yesterday.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too. Back to agriculture. Here's just one example. That would be growing grapes for wine, as I understand it, and I'm no expert. When the grapes are ready for sort of harvest, it's best if the leaves aren't very healthy, because then I think all of the strength goes into the grapes. So there again, you fly it and you see where the leaves are at their prime, and your grapes are going to be the bushiest and the best or whatever. Really, the leaves themselves aren't as important as the grapes. So the tool gives you that diagnostic power to be able to say, okay, well, the vines are just perfectly unhealthy, I guess, basically right here. At least the leaves are, and that makes our wine product a little bit better as it's harvested.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the notes I had from our conversation to prepare was like how folks are monitoring the stock of fruits on the vine or on the tree as they grow. And I think about how that could affect staffing and when you need the crews to come through and do the harvest and things of the sort. So I think that there's some incredible potential in that arena as well.
So, and the tools aren't tremendously expensive. As I said, this is maybe a $2,000, maybe a $3,000 drone, which is probably more than what every classroom will have. But the technology is getting cheaper all the time. So to be able to photograph in the near infrared is, it's not as expensive as what you'd think. And it's a tool that's tremendously valuable for farming.
Wow. Yep. So it's not always about just seeing your world from a different perspective because the drone can go up above your head, but it's a machine and it can have vision that supersedes what humans can. We could monitor, RF and radio communications or maybe activity in the upper atmosphere, electrical or otherwise, make it a communication output. I mean, it's just unbelievable what can be done with these things once they're up there. But what you're talking about now is the ability to see outside the human range of seeing, both thermally with, infrared, perhaps ultraviolet, right? So I guess as we pile these things up, it's going to be fascinating to find out how they affect the way that we plan and operate our endeavors, perhaps as they relate to agriculture in particular.
Right. And in fact, since you mentioned thermal, maybe we should talk a little bit about the idea of safety from the other perspective, and that would be the FAA is concerned about safety from drones so that people, aircraft don't get damaged, but there's a huge benefit of safety due to drones. Take, for example, your roof. So your roof has got a leak somewhere. The roofing contractor has to bring his ladder, get up there, search by hand. Instead of that, wait till after sunset, launch a thermal drone, and the part of the roof that is cooler, because it's got water leakage, will show up in the thermal image. So again, you're talking about beyond what a human can see, but it's super safe because you don't have a person on a ladder on a roof. I met a guy who was a contractor local here in Huntington. So sometimes we think these things are fantastic, but they apply to big cities. But this guy's local. He said he spent this has been maybe 3 years ago. His entire job was taking a drone to a house that a person wanted an estimate for a roof. He would fly the drone. From the drone technology, you can get a 3D model accurate to the centimeter.
Wow.
To, a tenth of an inch basically. Flies this roof, it will spit out then an application, will spit out how much roofing material you need, how big the roof sections are. It'll even tell you how much siding you have to have for your house. So if you're the contractor thinking, how do I make more money? You offer the customer, we'll put siding in your house. This is exactly how much you'll need. So you eliminate a little bit of the uncertainty from the contractor side and from the customer side. You give a really accurate estimate. I've even seen postcards. What contractors will do is they'll fly a neighborhood, kind of an older neighborhood, and they'll create models of every home. Then they'll send postcards and say, "Hey, your roof is bad shape. We have a picture of it." And this is, you might think to yourself, "It's a little creepy, people looking at my roof." But I mean, when you're in the air, like an airplane, it's legitimate to take a photograph. Yeah. Or if you're standing on the street, it's legitimate to take a photograph. It's public space, basically. But anyway, beyond the creepiness, I guess, you send a postcard to someone and say, "Hey, you need a new roof. We'll do it for you. Yeah. We can get you in a couple of weeks, and here's what the cost would be." So you have this anyway. That was beyond the safety aspect of it, but
no, I think that's like marketing and reaching your customers. That's a means to a channel of reaching your customers, which might be a mailing or whatever the case may be, but a means to get the information as to who your target customers can be. And it immediately made me think back to your real estate endeavor. And in my mind, I'm seeing like these beautiful flashing scenes of a house that's very, very attractive to me as a buyer, right? Because I can see it presented in this format. And the real estate agent saying, "Hey, man, this is a great way to showcase this home in a way that can sell it." And the fact is, the internet and the world that we navigate right now is much, ad driven. And I think that's okay. We need to kind of accept it and realize how it is that we can play in these new and growing economies around us. So I think that that's super fascinating, because to help companies target their endeavors to customers who will benefit from them is a great, good thing to put out into this world. To do so with some of this new tech, hey, there's just a moment, I feel like there's just like a split second where you're going to be able to look at it, say, I want to do this kind of work. Get out there, scale a business around it, because I don't mean to have the "it's getting so hot right now" kind of conversation, but it really is growing, and the competition's going to increase. But there's still this window where you can get out there and do really cool stuff, and scale it, and make good outcomes happen for folks.
And the applications are just, I mean, we think of some, and I've shared some, and you've shared some, but there's probably tons and tons of applications that no one's even tried. It just have to be someone thinks of the idea and does it. Another example about roofing, just kind of as an off topic, but if you have a tornado come through, or some big windstorm and a tree falls on your roof, well, there again, the person who's going to do the insurance adjusting can bring a drone, fly the house, and say, "Yep, we can see the damage, and we can get your check to you, so you can get your roof replaced more quickly." So I mean, it's not just sort of people trying to drum up business. It can be sort of disaster recovery. Certainly, when floods come through or hurricanes, drones go up, and typically they want the hobby type drone person to not put their drone in the area that's been damaged. They want professionals to come in, assess the damage, then the government can start targeting resources. But yeah, damage recovery from natural disasters, another safety, I guess, would be a way to put it, use. I think we talked previous about dam safety. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers here locally, again in Huntington, has a guy that will fly dams with a thermal drone. So you go at night after the sun's set, because the sun makes everything glow in the thermal camera, and you can see leaks. So they build a dam, but the water might be coming around one side of it, or going through the soil somewhere, and so you can avoid sort of dam failure by using a drone. I had a person for the Corps of Engineers ask me if I had a student who would mind to take imagery, and there's sort of these small time dams. I don't know even if the Corps is responsible for them, but they are interested in how they're managed. I don't know if they're sort of private dams or whatever, but they were looking for someone to automate the process of identifying these small-time dams so that the Corps of Engineers be aware of them. So, yeah.
And so to be able to assess those in a non-intrusive, non-destructive means is almost a miracle, right? And to be able to access those far-flung dams quickly and efficiently is just unprecedented. So this is where I keep feeling this frontier just beginning to open to us. At RCBI, we do a lot of work in the manufacturing arena, and provide quality training and lean assessments and so on. And one of our endeavors involves non-destructive testing, which we see around welded applications or applications in aerospace. You fly a plane so many times, you've got to assess it and make sure there aren't micro cracks and things flying. So there are ways that those are assessed through everything from magnetic fields to X-rays to conductivity, to try to assess the standing state of the structure without having to drill a core sample, if you will, right? So when you were talking about the leak in the dam, I thought to myself, how would you even know? And I'm like, well, I guess you could stick probes in there or drill in or whatever. And I realized how far inferior that could be to, just sitting there and, it feels like we were previously just literally poking around in the dark. Now we can have a whole book of information to work from, so that when we do want to poke around, we can poke around in the spot where we need, we already know we need some work.
Well, if you've ever had a water leak at your home, not inside the home, but somewhere between your house water and the meter, where it's underground, and you're like, they'll come and look, and they're like, well, yeah, there's water here, but we have no idea where it's coming from. No. Well, a thermal drone is the same deal for I suppose you could use it on your home, but for a public safety thing like a dam that the Corps of Engineers monitors, that's a huge deal. You can see water leaking. Okay, yeah, the soil's moist here, but where is it coming from? And a thermal drone would be able to, you'd be able to look at it and see where the ground is cooler, warmer, or whatever, and track it back
almost
to its
give
leak.
You that bullseye, right? Yeah, that target spot to look. Very good then. Well, so I think we talked a little bit about construction management. You talked a little bit about building information management, right? These comparison of plans to the actual. But I want to hearken all the way back to some work we met, doing years ago. You kind of walked in with some students had flown some structures in that case here at Marshall University and set up some point clouds and created some meshes from that. So like structure from motion was something that you were using.
Mhm.
I've heard it called photogrammetry sometimes. And can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that helps us create cool data field residues?
Yeah, it's a fantastic technology. It's based on really the human eye in this sense that we see in 3 dimensions because we have 2 eyes separated by a distance. And so our brain will interpret the 2 signals that we're getting from our eyes, 1 signal in 3 dimensions. So you can replicate that with a drone. So you take a picture from 2 slightly different locations at the same altitude, and then the software will interpret it and say, okay, the pole sticking up from one image leans to the right, and the pole sticking up from the other image leans to the left. So that gives the software all kinds of information about the height of the pole, and of course it has the GPS in the drone itself. So it knows how far you were away from it, how far you were from the ground, and all those things help the software to build a 3D model. It's fantastic technology. It's almost like unbelievable. You push a button on your computer and you come back the next day and it's produced you this 3D model. I say come back the next day because it's very computing intensive to take multiple images, not just 2. But we're talking about hundreds or thousands of images, stitching them together into sort of a map, but then also a 3D point cloud. By point cloud, it means that one point on picture of a drone matches a point from another picture from that drone. And so the software will say, hey, that's the same point. Now us, with our eyes, we're like, yeah, duh, we know that. But for software, it has to do sort of artificial intelligence,
Has to
you
go
might
through
say.
all the maths.
Yeah, has to go through
so
all
that
the
we
math.
don't have to.
Right, and create this 3D point cloud. So when we met, the reason I came was because I thought, well, this would be cool. It's a 3D thing, landscape, building, or whatever. It would be really cool to be able to take that 3D point cloud, turn it into a shell, and then print it on a 3D printer.
Yeah,
And of course,
can we print it? Is the answer.
and it was possible. I didn't bring any of the examples, but yeah, I flew that one-room school that's here on Marshall's campus, and it made it.
Well, I can tell you what I did was when you said, hey, can it be done? The immediate answer is yes. And it's like, do you know how? And my soft answer was, well, let's figure it out together. And,
Yeah.
and we did.
There's a way, yeah.
And we found some open source softwares and things that helped to make that possible and put together some resources for the classroom. Pretty proud of that. I'll have to, 3D printing is a little passion of mine, so I'll have to not walk too down that path, or that's all that we'll talk about. But that was a great way to kind of kick off, our relationship and create, 3D models from drone flights. I found it totally fascinating. I think about some of the software that you have described, and as you're saying, you push a button and it does the maths for you, so you don't have to. I'm like, yes, this is my 21st century life. Like, this is what I wanted. I keep saying, when do I get my jetpack? But the fact is, we all have jetpacks in fascinating new ways that I think we're not thinking about it as a jetpack, but it is a jetpack.
Mhm.
Whether it's a software tool that helps you process this incredible amount of information and get a really deep and broad perspective, whether it's an old or new place on the earth, or it's the actual technology itself and its capabilities to see beyond what we can see. We kind of have our jetpacks now, right?
Mhm.
And we just need to find cool, fun, new ways to learn to use them. I'm super pleased. Did you have any final points of anything interesting and fascinating that we need to?
Yeah, we could talk all day.
We certainly could. We certainly could. So I might, end with this question: is as we move forward, I know we're seeing the regulatory industry change. We're seeing opportunities from cinematic to safety to competition provide, again, the opportunity to get hands-on with drones and build new perspectives, build teams, build connections, understand things in new ways. What are 1 or 2 spots that we should keep our ear to the ground and really kind of concentrate on opportunities, whether they be educational opportunities, opportunities for experience, or to found a new business? What should we kind of keep our eyes peeled for as the drones are beginning to come from all over?
I think agriculture is an area of focus. I had an interview with a potential new hire at Marshall in our department, and she was talking about agriculture that she had done at her PhD institution. And she said because the regulations, are as they are, One of the hot areas in the United States is agriculture. It makes it more efficient. Certainly, as prices go up for all these things, they become even more sort of crucial about how they're applied, fertilizers and so forth. Drones, we have these little tiny drones here, but they can go, as far as the FAA is concerned, up to 55 pounds.
Wow.
And so you can get a drone, you can put a sprayer, and you can put a bottle basically of spray on there, and you can spray your crops with the drone. You can program it to do, as you mentioned about programming, you can program the drone to do that instead of a tractor to do it. You can program the drone to administer those things.
Wow.
So I think agriculture is a hot area.
It makes me think about just increasing in our proficiency, our ability to be productive, right? And also, like, I hate to say, I think flying the drone around the field might be a little more fun and even safer than walking the field,
Mhm.
right? We can walk the field too. Nothing ever stops us from walking the field or climbing up on the roof or doing whatever needs to be done when it needs to be done. But we can grow more efficient in both our productivity, whether we're producing agriculture outcomes or we're producing insurance outcomes or we're tracking construction projects. We can take drones to other planets. We can take drones under the oceans,
Mhm.
and we can take drones across the land as well as in the air. And, for me, I think that any and every opportunity that each one of us has to try to build skill and understanding in this arena, even if we're not direct participants, the regulatory industry is going to grow as it relates to drones. There are jobs there to be created. Cinematic uses, public safety uses, new and fantastic frontiers are going to be imagined. And, we want to put this resource together with the Benedum Foundation's support to help make sure that we kept our eyes focused on those new and coming endeavors, understanding that we don't just have to participate in this coming world, but we can help to drive outcomes.
It's interesting. Maybe I should clarify a little bit about sort of fun uses of the drone or like cinematic uses where in many cases you have an operator who is controlling the drone directly versus sort of more scientific uses where the drone is given a program, uploaded, and it flies the pattern that you've told it to fly. Because if you're trying to create a map product or something that covers every square inch, then flying it by hand might not give you perfect results. But if you use an application on your smartphone and you upload it to the drone, it will fly a grid pattern, almost like mowing the grass. It'll fly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You don't have to touch the controls during that process. It comes back, and then you process that imagery into a flat map product or a 3D point cloud that you can analyze.
Wow.
So it's a little different process than sort of putting the goggles on and sort of manually controlling the drone. It's sort of almost an automated process as it is.
So there's coding and programming and putting together endeavors as a system that can repeat so that images can be overlaid.
Right.
Man,
Or the
it's
same
astonishing.
same flight can be done over and over if you're monitoring for change. So yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to point that out because I think it's a little different. Maybe people's perspective is, you got this guy with a controller like this who, is watching the drone and making it go this way and that way compared to most of the flights I do. I have my smartphone. I'll have my smartphone attached to this. I'll upload a program. I'll push a button, and then I'll set it aside. And I don't set it aside. I have it in my hands, but I'll watch.
Keep your hands on the wheel.
And I'm just watching. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not interrupting the thing. It's flying its pattern. It's going to come back, and I'm going to get a map product or a 3D point cloud, a 3D model.
It's fantastic. So can you imagine the choreography, the whole crew that it would take, the writers, the producers, and everyone to kind of choreograph that whole thing? It is almost like you have at your fingertips an entire team with different responsibilities that are helping to contribute to this outcome as the drone flies its course. And we have that power at our fingertips, you said, with an application on a smartphone.
It's amazing technology.
We're there. We've arrived.
And
We're
my
here.
students, when I take them out and have them fly it for the first time, I'll say, okay, you download the app on your smartphone, put in the area that you want to fly. It will create the lawnmower pattern, and then they push the buttons, and then we all just watch.
That's
And
magic.
in a few minutes, it comes back and lands exactly in the spot that it took off. You take
Incredible.
the little chip out of the drone, you put it in your computer, and the images get processed. It's fascinating.
Man, That is absolutely fascinating. And speaking of fascinating things, your journey here has been fascinating. I'm so elated that you're here at the university. You know, and grateful for your leadership in geography, definitely. Grateful for our interfaces as well, and I look forward to many more in the future. So that's all we have for everybody here today. Unless you have any final points to lead off on.
Not that I can think of.
All right. And so, we'll hopefully provide some resources in any comments or any spaces, wherever we choose to kind of post this resource. We'll put some connections and links there too. And if you could follow up with some of that, so we could kind of cut to it for like part 107 and all that stuff.
Right,
I
cool.
think it'll help us. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Again, we thank the Benedum Foundation for their generous support of AgTech at RCBI. And I'd like to thank Dr. Jaime Leonard for joining us here today. Look forward to doing it again real soon.
That'd be great.
Take care.